Atlus's latest project brings together a potpourri of talent, if you will, from Persona, Shin Megami Tensei, Nier Automata, and even Evangelion to deliver a strange new world, score, concept, and title in Metaphor ReFantazio. For some background, I'm a big JRPG fan and love Persona 5 Royale, but fell off the other Persona games mostly due to pacing issues and the fact that the systems felt a bit recycled. With Metaphor, Atlus aims to build on their hits while taking some bold new steps. So, does this gamble pay off? Let's find out. And before we do, I'd appreciate your subscription or comment so that this channel and I can continue to grow. And thank you for all the support so far. It makes me excited for the future. The first hour is light on gameplay, focusing instead on setting up the world and key characters through animated and in-game cutscenes with a unique art style. The voice acting is top-notch as you uncover the story of a king murdered, and with no heir since his only son was killed years ago, challengers step up to ascend the throne. Your character is set out on a journey to kill this killer, with a deeper backstory to be discovered. It's refreshing that Metaphor deviates from the standard fantasy fare with new races, tribes, and bizarre monster creatures known as humans for some reason. By the second hour, you're eased into combat with a tutorial, and if you're familiar with turn-based RPGs, you'll feel right at home here. Combat revolves around a turn system where you and the enemy take turns based on a set number of actions. Exploiting enemy weaknesses grants you extra turns, while missing or having attacks blocked can cost you turns. Now, the real-time action combat Atlus touted is a bit of a stretch. It's similar to Persona in that you can attack an enemy to initiate battle, but here they have a stun gauge, which if broken allows you to start turn-based combat with an advantage. If they attack you first though, you'll be at the disadvantage, and if you're significantly stronger, you can defeat enemies without entering battle at all, still earning the experience and rewards, which is a nice quality of life feature. The tutorial wraps up with a boss fight where your character's power awakens, again very Persona-like, complete with a slick cutscene. The characters you meet are great too, and all have a reason to want to work together. There's your trusty sidekick, Gallica the Fairy, a man named Stroll who's out to prove himself worthy, and the battle-worn mentor, Grius. There's good banter as they learn each other and the true purpose of the mission they've set out on. The game introduces archetypes in Hour 3, which function like classes, warrior, knight, mage, etc., each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and abilities. This again is similar to Persona, but here all the characters can freely change their archetype outside of battle. Another interesting addition is the ability to scout dungeons before entering. You'll learn what types of enemies you're up against, which allows you to adjust your party's archetypes accordingly. This hour also unlocks an otherworldly library run by a mysterious figure who helps you expand your powers, and you guessed it, just like Persona. I spent a good chunk of the fourth hour in the library trying to wrap my head around the archetype system. It's becoming clear that build crafting will play a big role later on, and your party composition will matter. In an early dungeon, my main character's archetype was weak to fire and took a lot of damage and gave the enemies extra turns because they kept exploiting his weakness. If I had switched to another archetype, I would have had a much easier time, and playing on hard, this game at least early on, it's a fair bit difficult. Enemies hit for a lot and get extra turns every round, which forced me to use recovery items, and I never use recovery items. I just finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I don't think I used a single ether the entire game. In my last hour, I also learned to be mindful of enemy resistances because if you attack an enemy with an element they're resistant to, you lose your entire turn. Or if you attack an enemy and it misses, it costs 2 turns instead of 1. And with how much damage the enemies deal, missing even 1 turn can put you in a precarious position. Wrapping up my gameplay here, I found myself increasingly drawn into the combat. The archetype system shows a lot of potential and I'm eager to see how it evolves. Combine that with an engaging story and stellar presentation, and I'm genuinely excited to dive deeper into this world. If you told me this was Persona 6, where the combat, character relationships, and time management systems were largely the same, but instead of being a high schooler in Japan, you're in this medieval-esque fantasy world, I'd believe you. And somehow, even though it retreads a lot of the same ground, Atlus managed to make this game feel fresh and new. With the game promising nearly 100 hours of content, it's no surprise that the opening hours focus heavily on establishing a strong narrative foundation, and by the end of my time with it, I was fully invested in the world, characters, and gameplay. Even if you've never touched a Persona or SMT title, Metaphor stands on its own as a polished, engaging turn-based RPG with systems that are intuitive to learn. So far, this is one of those games that I just do not want to put down. I'm completely hooked, and yes, I do mean that as a metaphor.